Long before the age of Siddhattha Gotama, long before the rise and fall of kingdoms we now call ancient, there existed a world so distant in time that even myth seems young beside it. It was the era of Vipassī Buddha, a time when the lifespan of human beings stretched to 80,000 years, and their bodies rose like living monuments, towering and serene. The chronicles of the Pali Canon describe this age as peaceful, vibrant, and remarkably pure. Greed had not yet thickened the human heart. Violence was rare, and the world itself felt softer, gentler, as if nature had agreed to cooperate with humanity rather than struggle against it. This was a golden age, the kind of world where a Buddha could arise with ease. Before the first sermon could ever be spoken, there had to be a world capable of receiving it. That world took shape through countless cycles of harmony, an age where crops grew easily, where people lived simply, and where the clouds drifted in. Patterns that seemed almost deliberate. In such an era, people still confronted aging, illness, and death, but these experiences unfolded slowly, like distant storms on the horizon. Even so, these universal truths were enough to ignite the first questions in the mind of one extraordinary being, the prince who would one day become the Buddha Vipassī. Vipassī was born into royalty, surrounded by wealth and abundance that seemed endless in a world where time itself moved sluggishly. His birth was marked by prophecies, omens, and a radiance that astonished even the sages of that era. Some predicted he would become a great universal monarch, a ruler whose might would reach across the entire continent. Others foresaw a destiny far greater, an awakened one, a Buddha who would rediscover the path to liberation. As a child, the young prince lived in palaces built for the changing seasons. One for the rains, one for the cold, one for the warmth. Every comfort was arranged so he would never glimpse suffering, never see the shadows that linger just behind life's brightness. Yet destiny has a way of revealing the truth, even to those most shielded from it. As Vipassī grew, the natural purity of the age could not hide the deeper truth of existence. Despite all the luxuries, he eventually encountered the signs that have awakened seekers in every era: the frailty of old age, the pain of sickness, the certainty of death, and the serene dignity of a spiritual mendicant. For someone born in an age of long life and near-perfect ease, these encounters struck with even greater force. Suddenly, the prince saw the world not as an unending paradise, but as a cycle, delicate, ephemeral, conditioned. This realization stirred something profound within him, a hunger not for pleasure or power, but for understanding. And so, the future Buddha left his palace behind. He renounced the wealth of 80,000 years, the promise of universal kingship, the comfort of a world that adored him. Under the shade of the great Pali tree, he entered into deep meditation, probing the very mechanics of existence. What he uncovered was not a revelation from the gods, nor the wisdom of teachers before him, but a truth that had been forgotten across countless millennia. He pierced through the illusions of self, permanence, and control. He saw with piercing clarity how life arises, how it ceases, and why beings continue wandering from birth to birth. Vipassī became a Buddha not through belief, but through direct, unshakable understanding. After his enlightenment, he spent 7 weeks in serene contemplation. During these silent days, he did not rush to speak. In fact, like many Buddhas before him, he hesitated. The Dhamma he had realized was subtle, deep like the ocean, sharp like a blade, going against everything ordinary minds assume about life. He wondered if anyone could understand. The world might have been pure, but the truth was profound beyond measure. The thought crossed his mind. This Dhamma is difficult to see, difficult to understand, peaceful, sublime, beyond the reach of reasoning, subtle, experienced only by the wise. For a moment, he considered remaining silent for the rest of his long life. But the universe would not allow silence. Brahma and countless beings from different realms approached him, pleading for him to teach. The world, they said, had beings with little dust in their eyes, beings ready to understand even a fragment of the path to liberation. Moved by compassion, Vipassī opened his mind's eye and surveyed the world. Like a lotus pond full of flowers, some submerged, some emerging, some fully blooming, he saw that there were indeed those who could grasp the Dhamma. And so began the journey toward the first sermon. The earth seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when the truth, long lost, would once again be spoken aloud. The age was ready. The beings were ready. And Vipassī, enlightened and compassionate, prepared to walk toward the two disciples who would become the first hearers of the timeless teachings. The world before the sermon was a world full of possibility, quiet, ancient, and sacred, standing on the edge of dawn that would reshape the spiritual history of countless ages to come. As the Buddha Vipassī emerged from the stillness of his post-enlightenment contemplation, the question before him was not whether the Dhamma was true, but to whom it should first be revealed. A truth of such depth could not simply be spoken into the wind. It needed minds ready to hold it, beings capable of receiving the first spark that would ignite the long lineage of awakening. With the same clarity that had seen through the fabric of existence, Vipassī turned his enlightened awareness toward the world and scanned the hearts of countless beings. Among the oceans of consciousness spread across the human and celestial realms, two names arose in his vision: Khandha and Tissa. These two were not kings, not ascetics, not prophets. They were neither noble warriors nor celebrated scholars. They were simply human beings whose past lives had been shaped by quiet goodness, acts of generosity, moments of integrity, small decisions that gradually purified their minds. Over lifetimes, in the vast calculus of karma, these two stood out not because they were extraordinary, but because they were ready. Their hearts carried only a thin layer of dust, just enough to obscure the truth, but not enough to drown it. Vipassī saw in them a pair of lotus buds, rising above the water's surface, awaiting the first touch of sunlight to bloom. Choosing them held symbolic power. In later ages, Gautama Buddha would deliver his first discourse to a group of 5 ascetics, men of discipline and renunciation, but Vipassī was of a different time. The world during his era was gentler, less harsh, less stained by greed or corruption. In such an age, the seeds of enlightenment did not need the struggle and austerity that marked later spiritual epochs. 2 sincere seekers were enough. Through them, an entire saga would emerge like a vast forest growing from 2 ancient roots. Vipassī resolved to seek them out personally. When a Buddha walks with purpose, the universe responds. As he journeyed through forests and open plains, Devas cleared the path before him, whispering through the leaves as if announcing the arrival of something sacred. Animals stopped and watched with unusual calm. Even the air felt lighter, as though it recognized the significance of every step. For the world had waited an immeasurable stretch of time for the reappearance of the Dhamma, and now, with each footfall, that moment crept closer. Meanwhile, Khandha and Tissa lived unaware of the destiny approaching them. They had been questioning the nature of life, contemplating impermanence and the strange uneasiness that lurks beneath worldly pleasures. Though they had no teacher to guide them, their intuition pointed toward a truth they could almost, but not quite grasp. They were like wanderers at the edge of a forest, sensing a path hidden among the shadows but unable to step onto it. It was exactly this readiness, this quiet tension between doubt and yearning, that made them the perfect vessels for Vipassī's first teaching. When Vipassī drew near the place where they lived, the natural world responded, as if in celebration. The wind slowed, the lights softened, and an unspoken tranquility settled across the land. Khandha and Tissa felt an unfamiliar presence, a stillness that seemed to radiate from nowhere and everywhere at once. They followed that sensation to its source, and there, standing beneath the spreading branches of a great tree, they saw the Enlightened One. even without words. They felt the gravity of the moment, as if they had arrived at the destination of a journey they did not remember beginning. Vipassī looked upon them not with the gaze of a teacher meeting new students, but with the recognition of a gardener finding flowers he had long planted. He saw their potential, their readiness, and the long chain of causes that had led them to this meeting. In that silent moment, the future of the Saṅgha already existed in seed form. The world of human beings, devas, and all sentient life seemed to lean in with anticipation. The Buddha had found his first disciples. The silence between them was the final breath before the first Dhamma would be spoken again in the world. The field was prepared, the listeners chosen, and the cosmic stage set. Soon, the first sermon would break the stillness of ages, and the wheel of truth, lost for immeasurable time, would begin to turn once more. The moment the Buddha Vipassī stood before Khandha and Tissa, the world seemed to fall into an expectant hush, as if reality itself paused to witness what was about to unfold. The great Pali tree, under which they gathered, was motionless. Its branches spread like a canopy prepared for a sacred revelation. All around them, unseen by ordinary eyes, devas assembled in vast numbers, filling the sky like shimmering constellations. For countless ages, the Dhamma had been absent from the human realm, buried beneath the cycles of cosmic rise and decline. Now, as Vipassī opened his mouth to speak, it was as though the universe inhaled with him. His voice was calm, steady, carrying a clarity that cut through the stillness like light piercing darkness. He began not with dogma, not with ritual, but with truth as pure as mountain spring water. The nature of suffering, its cause, its end, and the path leading to that end. But for Vipassī, the teaching was not a repetition of words heard from others. It was the direct expression of what he had seen with perfect wisdom. To Khandha and Tissa, each sentence felt like a key turning in a series of ancient locks. As he spoke of suffering, they saw it not as a curse, but as a condition woven into the fabric of conditioned existence. When he described craving as the root of this suffering, it was as though he held up a mirror to their own minds, revealing the subtle grasping that had shaped their lives. His words were gentle, yet they struck with the force of truth, dissolving illusions they did not know. They carried. Then Vipassī illuminated the middle way, a path balanced between indulgence and self-torment. In his era, the world was not weighed down by harsh austerities or spiritual extremes. Yet the middle way still shone like a guiding star, reminding them that liberation comes from clarity and discipline, not from running to one extreme or the other. The teaching flowed effortlessly, like a river revealing its source. But the heart of the sermon, the moment the air itself seemed to vibrate, came when Vipassī expounded the principle of dependent origination. He spoke of how phenomena arise when conditions support them and cease when conditions fall away. Birth, aging, sorrow, despair, all of these illusions of permanence were shown to be nothing more than links in a chain. When he described how ignorance gives rise to formations, formations to consciousness, and consciousness to name and form, Khandha and Tissa felt the world rearranging itself inside their minds. It was as though the Buddha lifted the veil on existence, showing them the hidden machinery that keeps beings wandering in sasra. Each link he described, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, was not merely an idea, but a revelation that unfolded in their hearts with luminous intensity. And when he explained the cessation of these links, how the unraveling of ignorance leads to the unraveling of all suffering, the two listeners felt as though they were waking from a dream they had unknowingly lived for countless lives. Around them, subtle tremors spread through the earth. Ancient texts say that when a Buddha teaches the Dhamma for the first time, the very ground responds, trembling softly in recognition. The devas watching from above erupted in silent joy, their radiance brightening the sky until it seemed like dawn had arrived prematurely. A golden aura enveloped Vipassī, though he himself had not changed. Only the perception of those witnessing him had deepened. Khandha and Tissa, absorbed completely in the Buddha's voice, felt layers of ignorance falling away like dried leaves in a shifting wind. The teachings were not entering their minds as new information. They were awakening a memory older than any lifetime, a truth that had always been present but forgotten. As Vipassī continued, their breaths grew deeper, calmer. Their hearts grew lighter, freer. The sermon lasted only a short while in human time, but within it stretched the wisdom of ages. When Vipassī finally fell silent, the stillness that followed was not the same as the silence before. Something had changed. The air felt richer, the space wider. Even the shadows seemed softened by a new light. For the first time in an immeasurable span of cosmic history, the Dhamma had been spoken aloud again. The wheel of truth had been set into motion. And in the minds of Khandha and Tissa, something profound had already begun to stir, an awakening that would soon break open into full liberation. But at this moment, in the gentle quiet beneath the paley tree, they simply sat in awe, their hearts trembling with the first taste of the deathless. The moment the Buddha Vipassī finished speaking, the world seemed to settle into a silence so profound that even the breeze dared not disturb it. Khandha and Tissa sat motionless, their minds still, vibrating with the echoes of the Dhamma that had just poured into them like light filling a vast, forgotten chamber. The teachings had not merely reached their ears, they had entered the deepest layers of their being, dissolving ignorance the way dawn dissolves the darkness of night. And in that silence, as if guided by an unseen force, each of them turned inward, tracing the Buddha's words. Through the unfolding of their own consciousness, they saw how every thought, every emotion, every impulse was conditioned. They saw craving not as a concept, but as a living force, subtle and persistent, weaving the threads of becoming. They saw impermanence not as a philosophical idea, but as a truth shimmering through every sensation. And suddenly, with a clarity that could not be shaken, they perceived the end of the chain, the possibility of freedom, the cessation of all becoming, the peace that lies beyond birth and death. In that instant, the final barrier cracked. The illusion of I fell apart like a fragile shell breaking open to release the light within. Khandha awakened first, his realization unfolding like a lotus that had waited lifetimes to bloom. Tissa's awakening followed moments later, equally luminous, equally complete. The transformation was immediate and irreversible. The restlessness that had driven them through countless births vanished without a trace, replaced by a stillness so deep it seemed to echo through eternity. They were no longer seekers, no longer wanderers. They were arahants, liberated beings, free from all the inner storms that bind ordinary minds. Vipassī, watching them with serene compassion, recognized the change as clearly as one recognizes sunrise after a long night. The radiance in their faces, the calm in their posture, the softness in their breath, these were unmistakable signs of liberation. They looked up at him not as followers gazing at a master, but as awakened beings meeting the gaze of another awakened one. And in that moment of shared enlightenment, a quiet joy passed between them, deeper than words, older than the world itself. Then the Buddha spoke this simple phrase that would echo through future ages, a phrase used by countless Buddhas before and after him. Come, Bhikkhus. It was not a command, but a blessing, an invitation that carried the power to ordain without ritual, without ceremony. With these words, their worldly garments vanished, replaced by the monastic robes that Devas themselves fashioned from celestial cloth. Their hair disappeared as if touched by invisible hands. They stood transformed, serene, radiant, the first monks of the new era. This was the birth of the Saṅgha, the first monastic community of Vipassī Buddha's age. It began not with multitudes, not with grand assemblies, but with two beings whose hearts had opened fully to the truth. In them, the seed of the Saṅgha took root, small yet immeasurably potent, destined to grow into a vast network of liberated disciples who would carry the Dhamma across kingdoms, forests, mountains, and cosmological cycles. The simplicity of this beginning made it all the more profound. From two awakened men, guided by one awakened teacher, the path of liberation would flow outward like ripples expanding from a drop of water, falling into a still pond. Khandha and Tissa bowed to Vipassī, not out of obligation, but out of a deep gratitude arising naturally from the purity of their hearts. Though arahants, they recognized the immeasurable gift the Buddha had bestowed, the rediscovery of the path, the reopening of the door to the deathless. Together, the three of them stood beneath the pali tree, bathed in a golden light that seemed to arise from nowhere. Though some would later say it was the Deva's offering, illuminating the dawn of a new spiritual age. Thus the Saṅgha began, not as an institution, not as a hierarchy, but as a living embodiment of awakened wisdom. And as the sun continued its silent rise over the horizon, the three enlightened beings prepared to step into the world together, carrying with them a truth that would liberate countless others in the golden age to come. The legacy of Buddha Vipassī echoes across the endless expanse of cosmic time, carrying a weight that extends far beyond the boundaries of his era. In the scriptures, his dispensation is described as astonishingly vast, with countless beings attaining liberation under his guidance and a spiritual revolution spreading across the world like a wave of light. His enlightenment was not just a personal victory, it was a turning point in the spiritual evolution of an entire aeon. After attaining Buddhahood beneath the pali tree, Vipassī lived for many tens of thousands of years, an unimaginable span compared to human life today. And during this time, his teaching permeated every corner of society. Kings, nobles, merchants, ascetics, and even celestial beings came to hear him. His presence became a unifying force that dissolved old social boundaries, reminding all who approached him that liberation was possible for anyone who had the courage to look directly into the nature of reality. The serenity and majesty of his teaching style left a profound impression. Every sermon was said to carry the clarity of a crystal mirror, revealing the nature of suffering and the path to its cessation with absolute precision. One of the most enduring aspects of Vipassī Buddha's legacy was his role in establishing the archetype of the Saṅgha, a community of monks and nuns who renounced worldly attachments to pursue the path of awakening. His chief disciples, Khandha and Tissa, helped structure the monastic order, setting standards that would later be mirrored in the time of Buddha Gotama. The Saṅgha under Vipassī grew to an extraordinary size, becoming a radiant symbol of the Dhamma's transformative power. Monks traveled far and wide, taking with them not only doctrines, but also the living presence of the Buddha's wisdom. Through this network of practitioners, Vipassī's message extended even to remote regions, altering the course of countless lives. It is said that his teachings brought peace to war-torn regions and inspired moral reforms among kings who previously ruled with harshness. In these accounts, Vipassī appears not only as a spiritual teacher but also as a quiet architect of a more compassionate world. As the decades and centuries of his ministry passed, the world underwent what the texts call a golden purification. Society became more gentle, family life became more harmonious, and the natural environment itself was said to flourish under the influence of widespread virtue. Whether taken symbolically or literally, these descriptions point toward a central truth. The awakening of even one Buddha has the power to reshape the consciousness of an entire age. In this sense, Vipassī's impact cannot be measured in sermons or disciples alone. His awakening ignited a chain reaction of wisdom, spreading through culture, ethics, and even cosmology. Many beings who encountered his Dhamma would later be reborn in eras where future Buddhas appeared, continuing the path that began under his guidance. The scriptures highlight this continuity as a testament to the enduring power of a Buddha's presence, a force that reverberates across lifetimes and eons. When Vipassī approached the end of his life, his passing, parinibbana, was marked not by sorrow, but by a profound stillness that settled across the world, as if nature itself recognized the departure of a great being. He passed away in the great park of the city of Sumatara, lying between twin sala trees, in a scene that foreshadowed the serene departure of Buddha Gotama in a much later epoch. After his passing, his relics were enshrined in a magnificent stupa, towering high enough to be seen from miles away, symbolizing the grandeur of his legacy. This stupa became a pilgrimage site for generations, its presence reminding future beings of the teachings that once illuminated the world. Ultimately, the legacy of Buddha Vipassī is not merely a chapter of ancient mythology, but a profound statement about the cyclical nature of awakening. His life demonstrates that enlightenment is not the property of a single time or culture. It is a universal possibility, arising again and again when conditions are ripe. The knowledge of his existence helps us understand the vast scale of the Buddhist cosmology, where countless Buddhas have appeared, each renewing the Dhamma for a world that had forgotten it. In this long cosmic narrative, Vipassī's life stands as a beacon of clarity and compassion, a distant yet powerful reminder that the path discovered by each Buddha remains open to all beings who wish to walk it.